So, we're still here, it's 4:30, everyone's got their cookies, their coffee, it's almost near o'clock apparently. And are you ready to capture the Drupal 8 flag? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you might wonder, who is this weird person that's standing up in front of you? And yes, I do actually make that face and ask myself that exact question, especially at 3 a.m. when I'm working on flag. My name is Tess Flynn. I'm also known as socketwench. That's wench, not wrench. If you want to tweet about me, make note of the tweet. I have the address now. I'm a module co-maintainer for Flag, the Flag Friend, and for examples. And I'm a Drupal developer with Blink Reaction. If you want to know more about Blink Reaction, you can talk to me or Ray back there. Anyone want a squishy rocket? Because we have squishy rockets. Anyone? You want a squishy rocket? There you go. Good catch, by the way. Just in case you didn't know, we are hiring. So if you are interested in being a Drupal developer with us, just let me or Ray know and we'll talk about it. Okay. So let's slow down for a moment and set the Wayback Machine to 2013. And I was sitting in the audience at DrupalCon Portland listening to Angela Byron, web chick, talking about the Pants module, which is kind of like a prototype module for new versions of Drupal core. And she was sitting there on stage begging people, please, we need modules ported now. And I was sitting there thinking, yeah, that I completely agree with that, you're totally right. I hope someone else does it. Because at the time, I was thinking, well, why should I just contribute to Drupal 8 directly? I mean, it makes a lot more sense. You want to contribute directly to the thing that everyone else is working on. Why does it spend the time working on modules? Well, I was doing this already. I was doing this for about a year at the time that I started looking at working on updating Flag module. And I started running into a few problems. I only had a few hours a night free in order to work on Flag. So every night I would sit down, teach myself about Drupal 8, about Symfony, about all the new stuff in Drupal 8, and then I hope that I would find an issue that I could work on, and then hopefully get something done. The problem is that every day I kept seeming to get further and further away. I was having something I call the reverse Sisyphus problem. So if you remember the myth of Sisyphus, it's this man who's condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a hill every day of his life. And by the time he almost gets it all the way up there, it rolls all the way back down. And he has to start all over again. Repeat ad nauseum. Now, my problem was the opposite. The boulder was already rolling down the hill. And every night I tried desperately to catch up to this rolling boulder of Drupal 8 with the hope that maybe I could impart some small sense of momentum into the project before it rolls away again on me again. One evening, I was sitting there thinking, in order to work on this one issue, I have to understand a lot more about something. So I took one evening and I read a 200-page book about Symfony. And by the time I was done with that, the day was over. The next night, when I went to go work on the issue, someone had already fixed it. I was stuck in what I call the Valley of Dearth. When Drupal contributors start out, they start out at Beginner's Hill. And there's a lot of stuff on Beginner's Hill that you can work on. There's issue summaries. You can run tests. You can re-roll patches. It's a wonderful, green, happy field with bunnies. But everyone is looking at the edge of Beginner's Hill, and they want to be in Dev City, because Dev City is where the action is. That's where you get to work on the real issues, contribute real code, drive monster trucks, and all of the others. The thing is that there's a gap between Beginner's Hill and Dev City. It's the Valley of Dearth. Once you get past all the easily accessible novice issues, the pattern re-rolling, the issue summaries, you get stuck. You get stuck. What do you work on? Do you work on API docs, code style? Do you sit around hoping that maybe some magical issue will show up where the stars align and you have the knowledge necessary to actually push the issue forward without having to spend hours and hours and hours catching up on all of the new stuff? And it was really, really depressing. I was sitting at the bottom of the Valley of Dearth looking up at Dev City, wondering what the heck I was doing. And I was thinking about all of this. And like all good ideas come to people, mine came into the shower one morning, and I was thinking, wait, what if I just change my tactic? What if there's a better way? What if I just port flag module? See, I was a co-maintainer of flag module at the time for Drupal 7, but I didn't really like Drupal 7 all that much. Coming from an object-oriented programming background, Drupal 7 always looks a little weird. There's still a lot of odd complexity within flag module that I never quite understood. So the other problem was that the other co-maintainer was much more of an effective Drupal programmer than I was at the time. But no one was looking at Drupal 8. So I figured, hey, why not? We have Webchick asking for a module. I'm kind of stalled on contributing to core. I'll port a module and see what happens. So first question is, what is flag? Who in this room doesn't know what flag module is? You already got Swishy Rock. You're going to Swishy Rock. Good catch. That's 2 in a row. So here we have a node display. It's a perfectly normal, everyday node. You have a title, you have the submitted area, you have an image, you have some text, you have some links at the bottom like read more, and then you get to this stuff. Over in the corner, this unbookmark this and flag for abuse? That's not core. What is that? Well, those are flag links. So let's abstract this a bit. What is a flag link? Well, let's say we have our node, happy little node living in our database, and we have a user that comes by and really likes this node because they're thinking it's really shiny. And then they go stick a flag in it. The module that makes the point sound has yet to be found. Other users come along and they like this node as well, so they also stick flags. Now from this we can actually get to a definition of what flag module is. It enables administrators to define Boolean fields, a Boolean field like you would have on any node, that can be attached to site content, like any field, which each user may set or unset. That's the difference. Each user can set or unset that flag. There's 3 basic objects involved in flag module. There's a flag, an entity that can be flagged called a flaggable, something that makes my 8th grade English teacher, Mrs. Evans, cry every night that I say it. I can actually hear it right now. And another object called a flagging. Administrators define the flags, and they attach it to flaggables. After those are attached, the link is displayed to users. Users that have the appropriate permission can actually flag that particular entity using that flag. When they flag something, it creates a flagging entity. Now, if you delete the flaggable, the flaggings all disappear. If you delete the flagging, flaggable and flag still stays around. If you delete the flag is gone and all of the flaggings are gone. Those are the basic rules.
I think I understand what a flagging is.
Actually, we'll get to what a flagging is.
Okay.
So, a flag is that administrator-defined Boolean field. Since flag 2 has been stored as an entity, it may be attached to only one entity type at a time, so only attached to a node, only attached to user. You can define multiples of these, but any one flag an administrator defines can only be attached to one kind of entity. But it can be attached to multiple bundles of the same kind. So you can create a flag for nodes, and then attach it to articles, pages, and whatever kind of content types you've created. Flags are created under admin structure flags, and they may be fielded since version 3x. Flaggings are the entity that's created when a user sets a flag. So when they click that flag link, a flagging is created to store it. It basically stores 4 pieces of information. Which flag was set, on what entity the flag was set, when was the flag set, and who set the flag. Flaggables are any entity that exists that may be flagged, and for which flaggings may be created. So, now that we know what flag module does, we can start our porting process. You want to sit down, you start wanting to say, I'm ready to go. I've got my Red Bull, I've got my coffee, I've got my entire box set of Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or whatever, Star Trek in my case probably. And then you will say, okay, I'm ready to code. And then that's the very last thing that you should do. The very first thing you should do is do a code review. Do what you have to do. Wake up in the morning at 3 o'clock and look at your module. Go on vacation. And then at some point when you feel like it, start looking through your code. Don't look at the issue. Just look at it. Try to figure out how it looks. Try to look at it through new eyes. Ask yourself how your module really works. In flag modules case, it works kind of like this. We have Drupal, then we have several implemented hooks and alters, a function-based API. Flag itself implements its own hooks and also implements those hooks for its own purposes. But most of the bulk of the code is in some straight backend functions and handler classes. So what are these handler classes? Well, this is actually the one bit of object-oriented programming that was in Flag 3. Everything derives from a class called flag, which actually does all the basic flagging stuff. From there, we have a few different classes. We have flag entity, which relates the flag to any entity that we want to flag. And then we have several specific implementations for well-known kinds of entities, like node, like user, like comment. We also have a special case flag, flag broken, that actually is there just in case any kind of entity type gets deleted. Mostly, it's a pretty typical Drupal 7 module. You've got a large surface area of straight functions. Entity support was refactored in later in its life. Object-oriented programming was used. These all sound like great things. And then you start looking at it a little bit more, and you realize that it's kind of like the blob. All of that code sitting there, devouring entire cities. Because most of those handler classes were designed during the PHP 4 era. And today, PHP 4 classes kind of are a little weird. They have weird factory methods. They don't have any, and they don't really use constructors. That didn't come along until PHP 5. In 3 different factory methods for flag alone. All methods were public. All class variables were public. And basically, all of that stuff was just a big blob of functions. It was like someone took a whole bunch of functions and put it in a box and then put tape over it and said, here's a handler class. So we've reviewed our code. Now we need to figure out what we're going to do to start. The first thing you really want to do is to not write code. Don't write code yet, because the next thing you need to do is question everything. Again, look at your module through new eyes. Put away all of your preconceptions about how your module was written, what you did with it, how you expected people to use it, and start asking yourself some really important questions, like, how does it really have to work this way? We had to allow for this assumption X before, this special case. Do we still need to? Do people even do that? Is that how people really use the module still? Can we do this better? Can we do this simpler? After you've questioned all the things, you want to set some expectations. Most people fall along 2 different points of the spectrum. There are people who want to learn. They don't care about getting work done. They just want to go and learn new stuff, because new stuff is awesome. And if you're one of those people, you should start porting your module today. You shouldn't even wait. Start opening your laptop. Go ahead. You can ignore the rest of this talk to start porting your module right now. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have a lot of people who just want to get work done. I don't care about any of this other stuff. I have to port my module, get it over with, and then move on with my life. If you're one of those people, don't. Just wait. You don't want to wait too much longer, but you kind of want to wait. While there's a lot of example code out there, while a lot of modules are starting to be developed, while core does provide a lot of basic functionality that you didn't need before, The problem is there's not a lot of prose or introduction text to really work you through all the vastly different APIs. You'll end up being frustrated and throw away all that effort in vain. You don't want to do that yet. You want to wait. Now, most people are going to be in the middle. They're going to be in the state where they really kind of want to keep it experimental. They need to get some work done, but they really want to learn stuff, in which case, go ahead and start working on your module. But expect that you'll probably throw it away. That's perfectly normal, because during such a vastly different API cycle, you're going to run down blind alleys, do things the way you thought they were, to discover that there was a better way, have to redo everything all over again. That's normal. And it's a good expectation to go into your reporting process with that. You might also be tempted to actually start writing your tests first. Simple test is actually in Drupal 8 to this day, as well as 2 other testing frameworks, PHP Unit and React. The problem is porting your tests first is kind of like a double-edged sword. You can port it, but the problem is that it might limit your thinking. You won't be questioning all the things like you should have before. You want to go at this with fresh eyes, so you might not want to port your tests first. Then, once you've done all of that, you want to locate the most central piece of your module and then work your way out from that. So the very first thing we did in flag module was to port the flag entity. It's the most important object in the entire module. So first we wanted to redesign the flag class. We actually created a new construct. It's called flag interface. This is new to Drupal people, but it's been around in object-oriented programming for a long time. We also have another class that we're deriving from called config entity base. It's blue because Drupal provides that. Then finally we have the flag class itself. Now, let's actually break this down. This is what flag interface is. An interface is like a class, but it doesn't have any method bodies, nor does it have any variables. It's not really a class. It's more like a contract. A contract doesn't tell you what the electrician or the plumber is going to do when they arrive and actually fix things. It's going to be, these are the expectations that we have agreed upon before we do anything. And that's what an interface is. It's a contract. It allows you to specify this class does this stuff. And it's best practice object-oriented programming. Flags interface is pretty simple. It's a little bit more complicated than this today, but this is actually still most of the interface. It doesn't do that much. Next, we want to decide what kind of entity flag is. In 7, there's only one kind of entity. There's entities. That's it. In Drupal 8, there's 2 different kinds. There's configuration entities and content entities. A configuration entity is best for anything that the administrator defines. So like node types are a configuration entity. The data is stored in the database, but can be exported to YAML, and then from there it can be moved from site to site to site. It's basically structure. It's not data. So anytime you go under the admin structure menu, you're probably working with a configuration entity. For configuration entities in Drupal 8, we derive from a Drupal-provided class called config entity base. It's the foundation class for all configuration entities. It does all the Drupal work, so that you can just do your work. Config entities, like most entities, have fields. Now, to define fields for a configuration entity, we create a config entity schema. That does all the field stuff for us. It tells us the data type of each field, and basically tells Drupal, whenever I save this entity, go into this class, find these variables, and save them to the database. That's what the config entity schema does. This is a portion of what flag schema looks like. It's stored within the module root directory /config/schema, and you can see that it's basically a series of independent variables. ID is global, flag short, unflag short. These are just variables. They just store stuff. We don't have to do anything else to define our entity field, our config entity fields. We're all done. Once we have those, we probably should also define some class variables to store them in the configuration entity. The best practice is to create a class variable for every field in your schema. And the reason why is it gives you two advantages. It gives you code completion in your integrated development environment. It also provides a natural place to document your schema. You don't want to document it in the schema.yaml file. Document it in the entity instead on the class variable. This gets to an important point. Please use an IDE and a debugger. Really, it's time. Drupal 7 had 3,000 files. And really, a lot of the code that most module developers would interact with were centralized in a handful of files, making it easy to actually just find stuff you needed to find. But in Drupal 8, it has at least four times that many files. And the strategy is vastly different. The strategy is instead many smaller files with compartmentalized code. It's a lot more difficult to find it using the old techniques you learned during Drupal 7. This is why an IDE is the best way to go, because an IDE works best in this kind of environment. You don't actually have to go and just use a find on a text file. Once you define your class variables, you should define a getter and setter for every schema variable. And do it in your interface. Don't do it in the class, do it in your interface. Because it's part of the class's contract. You want to make sure that everyone knows, I also have this data that you can get and unset. Never mark a schema class variable as private, because Drupal will never be able to access it. How Drupal actually gets to your class variables is via the config entity base class. There are two methods, get and set, and they're able to actually access those variables from your class. If you mark your variables as protected, they're still fine. Mark them as public, still fine. But if you mark your variables as private, Drupal won't be able to access them because config entity base won't be able to access them. So we have our entity. Let's take and plug it into Drupal. We've made our interface, we've made our classes, we've derived from config entity base, we made our schema, we're ready to go. Let's plug it into Drupal. We box it up, we hand it to Drupal, and then Drupal goes, what the heck is that? It's just a class. I don't know what the heck you're talking about. What do we do with this stuff? What did you give me? And the flag class just kind of sits there feeling really sad and lonely. Like me on a Friday night watching Mark. What we need is another piece of information. We need to tell Drupal what this class does. We need kind of like an IKEA assembly manual to build this entity. We need a config entity assembly manual for flag. We hand both the bottom of the flag and the assembly manual over to Drupal, and it goes, oh, I get it now. I'll go and build stuff. What that assembly manual is an annotation. An annotation tells Drupal what the class does. You put the annotation in the class doc block inside the file. When you do a cache clear, Drupal will read the annotation and know what it needs to do. Tells Drupal what the following class is, why it's important, and also where the related pieces of functionality to this thing are. This is what flags annotation looks like. Again, part of it. We can tell that it starts with this config entity type. It's got some ID and label information, a permission, a huge thing called handlers, another thing called links. So let's break this down. The very first line is config entity type. And that basically tells Drupal the class that follows this doc block is a configuration entity. So now Drupal knows, okay, it's that thing. And it's used for feature discovery. So again, when you do a cache clear in Drupal reads the annotation and knows what that is and registers it. The next thing is the handler sequence. This tells Drupal where to find the related pieces of functionality. Things like this list builder, also some important forms. So now we've told Drupal where all this stuff is. We need to build that administration interface. So this is what the flag administration interface looks like. This is the list form. It's very simple. It just has a table and a button called Add New Flag. This page is provided by the flag list controller class. It derives from a Drupal provided class called config entity list builder, and basically just provides the admin structure flags page. The base class that Drupal gives us only has two important methods we actually need to implement. One is called build header, which tells Drupal which columns of the table we want to display. And then the next one is build row, which allows us to populate each row of data. We don't even have to get the entity. Drupal hands the entity for us. All we have to do is put in an array and display it. That's it. Next, we have the flag add and edit pages. Both of these pages are pretty similar. They allow you to create one of those flag entities. They're mostly the same except for a little detail. The form classes that support this look like this. They all derive from entity form. And then for the add form and edit form, they derive from another flag class called flag form base. Now you'll notice there's another one for flag delete form that derives from another Drupal provided class. I'll get back to that. Flag form base does all the real form stuff. It builds the form, it handles the validation, it handles the submit. The flag add form and flag edit form are actually very small classes. All they really do is they modify where the default values come from. For add form, it comes from a static variable. For the edit form, it comes from the entity itself. It also changes what the submit button text is. That's it. This is a very, very basic structure. Now the reason why we have this derivation is the forms are very similar. So we're actually relying on that base class to do all the real work for us. And each one of those implementations just handles these few details. We also have a flag delete form. The delete form is very different, but it's also not complicated. It's just got a question, a bit of text, and then a yes or no action. Now how this works is it actually goes back, and we derive flag delete form derives from another Drupal provided class called entity confirm form base. Now if we go forward, the flag delete form just provides that quick yes or no question. And the entity confirm form base actually allows us to specify just the question, just what the text is, what to do when I click yes, and what to do when I click no. Just 4 things. Now we have our forms. We need to make this all routable. We haven't attached a URL to any of this yet. So when an administrator stops by Drupal 8, they have their web browser, they send a request to Drupal, and usually what happens is we go to hook menu. Any Drupal 7 developer will know about that. It matches some route that is coming in from the internet to some chunk of code within Drupal. But we don't have hook menu anymore, so we need something else in order to control that mapping between URL and chunk of code. What we have is a document called flag.routing.yaml. And it's basically a table. It has route names, and then it has paths. It supports variables as well. This gets to another important detail. Drupal 8 doesn't think in paths, it thinks in route names. So when you're thinking about things in route names, how do I add stuff to existing menus? Like, I need to add the flag add page to admin structure. How do I do that? You'd think, well, why don't I just go over to flag.routing.yaml and put it in there? Well, the problem is that file only allows you to define new routes. It doesn't allow you to modify existing ones. So we have a different file. We have flag.links.menu.yaml. Both of these are in the root directory of the module. And this allows you to add links to existing routes. And it's, again, a simple table. It provides the route that we're attaching and then the parent route. That's it. Next, we want to have that add button so we can connect the list form to our add and edit form. For that, we need another file. And this one is flag.links.action.yaml, and it gives us the ability to attach click actions to existing routes. It's, again, just basically a table. It has a route name and in which route that one appears. It also has other information like the title and so on. So you might be thinking, geez, I was sitting here for like 25 minutes listening to this weirdo talk, and it's like, this is a lot of code to think about. I'm not sure if I want to work on Drupal 8, but just looking at this, I feel like I'm getting all this deep hurting, I'm just looking at this particular effort. Well, let me tell you, today, I'm going to show you how to do all of that in less time than I've been talking. What we do, so the problem is that we have a lot of scaffolding in Drupal 8. Lots and lots of scaffolding. YAML files, interfaces, base classes, base forms. It's all necessary stuff, and it's really tedious to write. And if you go about it writing it the way I am, you'll probably shoot through most of a DP collection of dark shadows before you finish. The 1966 one, not that we don't need that film. Thankfully, you can reduce tedium today by using Drupal console. So let me show you how to use that. Once you install it, generating a module is really easy. You just issue Drupal space generate :module, and you tell it a few details. The process is interactive. It asks you a question and then you respond. You don't have to remember parameters and look at the help file and all of this stuff. You can actually just start asking it to know what to do by issuing one command. So we tell it we want to define a new module called flag, put it in the modules directory, because Drupal 8 puts things in the modules directory instead of in Drupal 7. We want to tell it what the module description is, what package it's going to be under, and a few other questions. Once we're done, boom. It generates the directory, the info file, and the basic module. Well, it's not that much. There's still a lot more to do. Thankfully, you can also generate config entities. So all of that work that we just spent 20 minutes talking about, issue Drupal space generate entity config, tell it the module. You don't even have to find the module. Just tell it which module it goes into. And then tell it the entity class name and the entity name itself, and it generates everything for you. It generates the forms, the interface, the entity class, everything, all your routing documents, everything. All of that is done. You're ready to rock. You can get Drupal console at drupalconsole.com. There's also a drupal.org project for it, and it's on GitHub. Or you can talk to Mr. Olaves right here in the front row. He's one of the primary developers. All right. So we have our entity, our config entity. Now we want to port the flagging entity. Flagging entity starts out its life pretty similar to the flag entity. We have a flagging class, a flagging interface to specify our contract, and we derive from another Drupal-provided class. In this case, content entity base. Content entity base is best for user-created entities, so for nodes as opposed to node types. Instead of a schema file, we actually define what fields belong in the entity by overloading a method called base field definitions. Unlike Drupal 7, you don't have to implement a schema. Base field definitions alone are enough to actually define the fields in Drupal 8. One thing, you're done. Beyond that, flaggings are really kind of weird because they're not really created through forms like you would with a node. It works kind of like this. You have a user goes to their web browser, they go to Drupal, and Drupal is going to modify the display of an entity that they're viewing using flag entity view. The user might click a flag link. Now that link goes somewhere in Drupal to some route because everything's a route. And then something else happens, and then we eventually want to get to entity save to save our flagging entity. So what's the something in the middle? We could define a straight function called flag. That's what we had in Drupal 7. That sounds fine, right? But that's not a really Drupal 8 way of doing things. So we really can't do that. So what we instead have in flag for Drupal 8 is we have a flag service. The flag service is basically a plain old PHP object. It's global. It exists throughout the entire world. It's kind of like your storefront for your module. You want to walk in, you want to go buy your module, and here's all the stuff that you can get inside of this module. So like flagging stuff and unflagging stuff, and so on. You register the services container-wide through flag.services.yaml or whatever your module name is. And again, you don't have to spend a lot of time writing it because you can generate it in Drupal console with just generate service. The flag service has two primary methods that are the most important things, flag and unflag. Anywhere inside of Drupal, you can flag stuff by getting the service, the flag service, and then calling flag or unflag. And you're done. All right. Now we want to make this expandable. We want other people to be able to build on top of our module. And we want to be able to handle a whole bunch of entity types. So, we have our flag class, and we want to relate it to all these different kinds of flaggables that are out there. So you might think, okay, sure, why don't we just create some base classes? We'll create a flag node class, and we'll create a flag user class. And then you start thinking, well, then we have all these entities, and Drupal 8 has a whole heck of a lot more entities, and geez, what do we do now? Does this look familiar to anybody? Anyone? I'll give you a squishy rocket. Bingo! Let's not recreate handler classes. Let's not recreate handler classes because they're hard to expand and they're not discoverable. We don't want to do that. We've been down that route. It was a bad thing to do. So instead, we have our flag class and we have the flaggables. How do we relate it? What we do is we use a plugin. In this case, we have a user flag type plugin, and that allows us to relate to the user entity type. The flag type plugin relates the flag to the flaggable. It's basically a bit of glue that holds these two pieces together. It's discoverable through a custom flag type annotation. So you can define your own annotations in your own module. And even more importantly, if you want to actually create your own flag type in your module, just implement the flag type annotation and derive from my own base classes. And there you go. You have your own flag type right there. Every time you do a cache clear, boom, you can expand your own flag just like that. Plugins are added dynamically to the class, not a subclass. It's kind of like a mixin. All plugins derive from a Drupal-provided class called plugin base, and we have a small class hierarchy. We have flag type base, then we have entity flag types, node flag types, user flag types, and so on. This is a lot better than the handler classes because these are a lot smaller. They don't have a whole bunch of functionality in it, just the necessary bits in order to glue things together. But you might notice we still have a problem. Sure, we have the one for node, for user, for common, but what do we do about all those other entity types that are in Drupal? Drupal 8 has a lot of entities. What do we do? Well, we actually have a special kind of plugin called a plugin derivative. It's a facility that allows one plugin to actually use data to make it look like multiple plugins. And we create one of those dynamically for each entity type that's not covered by a specific implementation. All right, so we close that down. How do we get from the flag link to flag and unflag in the flag service? We actually just use another plugin, a link type plugin. And the link type plugin allows us to specify how we're going to attach that. You just said, do we want to use an AJAX link, a confirm form, a normal link? There's actually a fourth kind today, which allows you to enter field information in the flag itself. And again, because it's an annotation, there's a custom link type annotation, so you can define your own link types. So let's create an API so that other people can expand stuff. In Drupal 7, everything was a hook. Everything was a hook. We did it for everything in Flag. To define flags, to validate and grant access, to react to events, to provide flag types, and to provide link types. But in Drupal 8, not everything is a hook. Hooks aren't everything in Drupal. It looks a lot more like this. We use configuration management to define flags, plugins for flag types and link types, events to react to events. We still have hooks. There's a bit of a debate on whether or not we want to keep those, but we still have hooks, and hooks are still a valid construct in Drupal 8. So what are these events? So let's say we flag something, and then we need to tell everyone else that something was flagged. How do we do that? Well, we have the flag service. The flag service knows that something was flagged. And it's going to go and talk to another service in Drupal 8 called the event dispatcher. The event dispatcher has a number of subscribers which are saying, please tell me when something is flagged. And then whenever someone flags up, the flag service issues a flag event class, which the event dispatcher uses to broadcast to all the event subscribers. This actually takes about one line of code in order to do, so it's very easy. There's only a few flag 8 events right now. We want to do more, but these are the ones we've got to date. Again, we also can use hooks. We do use hooks for a few things, and how we do that is we inject the module handler interface into the flag service, and that provides us the invoke all function that we need to call those hooks. All right. So how do you want to run your project? I learned a few important lessons while I was running my project. The first thing is you want to do your project in public, but you want to put a warning label on it. When you first start out, your first question is, where do I keep my code? If you're really gung-ho, you might want to put it on Drupal.org inside of your project directory, inside of a branch, where everyone can see. The problem is, are you sure you're ready? Are you the experimental person? Are you the I want to learn person? Are you certain that you're not going to go down a blind alley with your design? All right, so you might think, well, I'll put it in a sandbox. That's that way that users won't go and download my stuff until I'm sure it's ready. It's easy to make a Drupal.org sandbox, but few people see what a sandbox is, and they have a low level of confidence. So then you might want to say, well, I'll put it on GitHub or Bitbucket. I'll put it on some other public repository. Just because maybe you just need a clean break. I put mine on GitHub because we had some discussion internally, and we came to the decision, let's just put this entire project on GitHub to make sure that we don't run into a few possible problems. When you do need help, please ask for help. There are a lot of people in Drupal that will want to actually help you. But when you do ask, be very patient and show a lot of appreciation. A lot of core developers have spent a lot of time working on Drupal 8, and it can be a bit exhausting. People who actually are willing to help, they need some kind of assurance that their input is very appreciated. Plus, if you show a lot of appreciation, they might help you in the future again. There are lots of places to find help. Drupal-contribute on IRC was the most important for me to find help. Also, you can go to drupal.org/list-changes to see any new changes in Drupal core. There's also the Drupal project issue. What if money is your problem? What if you just need to get your team together so you can just hack? Or maybe you need to go attend a conference to work out some really important, difficult bugs. What if you need just to take time off from work to code? What I did is I actually needed to go to DrupalCon to work out some really serious knowledge gaps that I was actually having when developing this module. And I ran a crowdfund on Drupal Fund in order to send me to DrupalCon Austin. And the few days that I was there, I was able to blow past all of those problems. So maybe money is your problem. Once you've been working on your project for a while, you might want to say, when should I move it back to Drupal.org and put it in my project page on a branch? Or should I just keep it in a sandbox? When should I know what that is? And it kind of comes down to these 4 different things. People might be worried that there'll be a whole bunch of issue queue noise as users try using your incomplete module. Or there might be Git log pollution, where you have issue numbers from foreign repositories that will eventually make their way on Drupal.org, referencing issue numbers that don't exist on Drupal. On the other hand, putting in a project branch allows you to leverage the community. It gives you a lot of visibility. A lot of people will look at these 4 issues and start thinking, I really should do this. It's much more important that I keep the issue queue noise down and the Git log pollution down, because I need to just get a lot of stuff written before I can start getting a lot of contributors back. This is actually the wrong thing to do. You want to do this. In my experience, we had very few issues. We had about 130 issues by the time Flag was moved back to Drupal.org. And most of those were, Tess, can you remember to do this later when you're more awake? That was actually a lot of my issues. The Git log pollution only became a problem because we stayed away from Drupal.org for too long. And we didn't leverage a lot of community or visibility. It took a lot of effort and a lot of PR effort on my part to actually let people know that this thing existed. Things are also a lot easier now than they were before. There's example module for Drupal 8 where you can just see a wonderful example code. There's also Drupal console, which makes your life so much easier as a Drupal 8 developer. All right. If you want to learn, port your module now. Or if you're working, you just want to work and get stuff done, you might want to wait. But don't wait too long. Drupal 8 actually is really close to getting to a release candidate. We're late in the beta cycle. So there's a lot of stuff that have been done. There's a lot of tooling that's already been built up. So don't wait too long. Please do a code review when you first start porting your module, because you never know what you're going to find when you look at that module with fresh eyes. Question everything. Nothing is sacred when you start your porting process. So rethink everything you have. Please use an IDE and a debugger. If you're one of those text file people that just uses a simple text editor, using an IDE for the first time will make you want to tear your hair out. And then a week later, you'll wonder why the heck you didn't do it sooner. There's a lot of open source ones out there. There's NetBeans, there's Eclipse. If you want to put down a few bucks, you can actually get PHP Storm, which is the one I have. Patiently ask for help and show appreciation when you get it. Do your porting process in public, but put a warning label on it. If money is your problem, consider crowdfunding. Move out of your sandbox fast. Don't wait. It'll be more painful the longer it stays in that sandbox. And things are a lot easier now because you can generate a whole bunch of stuff with Drupal console, and there are wonderful examples from the example project. I'd like to take a moment to give thanks to a lot of people that made this presentation and Flag for Drupal 8 possible. Tim Plunkett, Larola, Kathy, David Reed, Wiz1 Solutions, Lauren Shea, and of course Blake Reaction, who's back in the corner over there with Ray. I have one more squishy rocket. Who wants a squishy rocket? Who? Anyone? You were first. Oh! The ladies have got the arm today. It's hard to throw one of those things without bumping my presentation remote. Again, we're hiring. Just if you're wondering, talk to Ray. We've got a booth in the auditorium. Also, come sprint with us if you want to learn and contribute to Drupal core or any number of projects like Drupal console or example module. We're right here to help you. I'll be mentoring. We'll help you set up, find some issues. It's going to be in the Student Center East Tower, room 605. Also, thank you all for being here and sticking with me to the very end of the day. You can find